And we're also delighted to present you with the honorary membership of the club. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I must thank all of you for giving me this opportunity of being here to meet with all of you, to be able to interact with you. And now, of course, the biggest surprise was the honorary membership of the club. Thank you very much for it. I have been with Maruti for a long time, right from the time the company started. And I think all of you probably would know the background and history of how this company came about and the kind of events which led to its today becoming a Suzuki subsidiary owned 56% by Suzuki of Japan, and this transformation from a 100% government company which was incorporated in 1982. So it's been a very eventful journey throughout this period, because always after a few years some changes were always taking place. And in some way or the other, I think Maruti always remained in the news. It never got to the stage where it had a period of being all quiet on the back burner kind of situation. The interesting thing, I think, which I would like to mention to you is that we started at a time when socialism was still very much at its peak. And all the controls and regulations which governed any kind of activity, especially on the industrial front, were very much active at that time. We were a public sector company, and we remained legally a public sector company right till 1992. And we worked within all the rules and regulations which governed a public sector company. When we started, I think it would be hard to find a single person who thought that Maruti had any future and would last beyond a few years, because it was considered to be a highly political project. So one of the surprises, I think, is that despite that kind of a working environment of a PSU and government and cars being very, very low in priority in a socialistic system of planning and working, Maruti still managed to flourish and became one of the more successful companies in India. Even today, when Maruti has grown to this size, a lot of investors, and especially investors outside India, recognize that India is a huge market and it's a country where you have to be present. But very few people are putting their money into India for manufacturing as yet. And I think they all have some, or many of them have, some kind of inhibitions or fears about investing in manufacturing in India, because against the success stories like Maruti, there are others also. There have been some not so good stories about what's happened to investors. And instead of learning from those failures and seeing what should not be done in India, people just keep away from here. But the fact is that the Maruti experience shows that a company which was started without anybody giving it a hope of success actually has become a company which has been immensely successful in any kind of parameters. Today, the market cap of Maruti is somewhere between 26 and 27 billion US dollars. It's a market cap which is more than 50% higher than of the parent Suzuki Motor Corporation of Japan. The contribution of Maruti to Suzuki, to its balance sheet, is so large that Suzuki has recognized that its future, its ability to survive as an independent company, is largely dependent on its Indian operations. And it is that recognition which led Suzuki to take the decision to invest something equivalent to $3 billion in the Gujarat expansion project in a very unique manner, in the sense that that investment in a 100% Suzuki-owned company, would be made only in the form of equity and with the depreciation money which would accrue out of that equity investment which would be made. It would not have any independent structure of sales or marketing of its own, but all the products would be sold at cost with no profit, with no surpluses being generated in Gujarat, to Maruti in Haryana. We would sell the products, we would make the profits. The idea behind this was that in this manner, Maruti would get enormously strengthened because we would have with us the money which would otherwise have been invested in expansion in Gujarat. And with that money, we can strengthen our R&D, we can strengthen our marketing, our sales, service, and all of that. It's an arrangement which does not exist anywhere in the world, where a parent invests in a country where it already has a subsidiary, invests 100% in that subsidiary, but channels all its profits through the joint venture subsidiary. When this proposal was mooted, investors would not believe that such an arrangement could happen. They said it's too good to be true. There must be some catch in it somewhere. Of course, there was no catch in it. The catch was that Suzuki wants to strengthen Maruti. If that is a catch, then that was the catch. But that shows the extent to which Suzuki is relying upon its Indian operations for its future. And that is why the president of Suzuki comes to India 5-6 times a year. No president of a foreign company ever comes to India that many times. He keeps coming all the time because he really believes that this is where the future lies. So I'm just saying this to convey that if people learn from the experiences of the successful companies in India and also learn from the failures of foreign investments in India, both are learning experiences, failures perhaps even more useful than the successful ones, then it is very possible to set up excellent manufacturing facilities in India, make them highly competitive, and use them to grow for the mutual benefit of both their home countries and for India. And that's a message which I think should come out of the experience of Maruti and to some extent of Hero Honda and some others in the automobile industry, that success in manufacturing in India and success at a very high level is extremely possible. but things have to be done in the right manner. Maruti today, as Mr. Venkat Narayanan mentioned, commands about 47% of the market. This year, we will be making over 1.6 million cars. The Gujarat facility is coming on stream, and as Gujarat expands, we will move to 2 million and subsequently, hopefully, to 3 million cars in India. We are today, I believe, the fifth largest car market in the world. We have moved up from nowhere when we started to the present fifth position in the world, and we should become fourth in the next 2 or 3 years. After that, let us see if we can climb any higher subsequently. So I think that's all I would like to say, and I leave it open for any kind of questions.
Thanks very much, Ms. Bhargava. We now open the session to questions. Whoever wishes to ask a question, kindly raise your hand. Once you are identified, a microphone will come to you, and then you will ask the question.
In the next few years, are you going to export more Indian car to Japan?
Well, I hope we can, but the number of cars which we expand to Japan will depend on how the Japanese consumers accept our product. We have started exporting only a few months ago, and it's too early really for anybody to assess how well the products are being accepted by the consumers. It usually takes closer to 1 year before you can make a judgment on the degree of success of a product like a car in a new market. So till now the feedback is okay. But as I said, I would not at this stage say that exports to Japan have been very successful, because as you would know, the Japanese consumer is a very choosy customer. He doesn't easily accept foreign-made cars. The only cars which do well in Japan are either cars made in Germany or some cars made in the US. And cars made elsewhere in the world don't particularly succeed in selling in Japan. So if we can actually succeed in making this car an acceptable product to the Japanese customers, I think it would be the first time an Asian manufacturer has succeeded in Japan. I think so far we have exported 2,000 and a few hundred cars to Japan, a little over 2,000 cars.
Yeah, please pass on the microphone
Behind you.
whoever wants to. Yeah.
Hi, this is Anu Sharma from Kuchel. Wanted your view on the GST rate being set for the passenger vehicle, 28%. So, and also there is the talk of additional cess which would be levied on the luxury vehicles. So, how do you see this affecting Maruti Suzuki?
I'm not aware yet as to what rate of GST will apply to the different cars which we make. Because there are cars below 4 meters, there are cars above 4 meters, there's a special GST depends on the engine size, or it is not today there's excise duty is different. I don't think that the rates for applicable to different products have yet been announced or worked out. My understanding is that these product-wise application of rates will be something which will be attended to by a committee of secretaries formed by the council, and these will come out in course of time. And without knowing the rates applicable, it's very difficult to make any kind of a comment as to whether these rates will lead to a reduction in the market price or will lead to an increase in the market price. It's just not possible to say.
Naresh Fernandez, take the microphone.
Thanks, Venkat, for elevating me to the leadership of store. My name is Vivian Sen. Mr. Bhargava, my intention is not to inject the SAR note, but what I find is that while Maruti has been good to former employees, to its executives, to customers, and to the country as a whole, I think its addiction to cheap labor has not diminished. I met, currently you don't have casual workers, you have apprentices. I went to the Manushya area and I met a whole lot of guys who are at the lower level, and they earn little more than the minimum wage, and they live in dingy, cramped rooms. In fact, Ravish Kumar of NDTV, he said that the right to a window must be made a fundamental right in this country. My point to you is that while Maruti is doing well and companies are earning bumper profit, should we not have a rather enlightened view and give people at the lower level a stake in the economy by giving them wages which are which can not only give them bread and butter but a little jam as well?
See, there are two or three things which you have to keep in mind. Firstly, an industry like the automobile industry has to have a certain amount of flexibility in its labor force because the demand for cars is not steady throughout the year, and from year to year there is a factor of a significant variation in the production and demand levels. And companies have to be able to adjust to those. It happens globally. It's not something which is only specific to Maruti or to India. It happens everywhere. If you look at the production from even 2011 till today, you'll find that there was a big increase in production in 2010. I think we grew by about 30-odd%. And then from 2011 till 2014, the market actually declined. So if you have an inflexible working force with everybody as a regular worker, then what do you do when the market declines? That's one factor. The second factor is that you have to also, to some extent, be consistent with what is happening throughout the industry. And we have changed the system. Within the problem is the law, of course, because the law in India today does not permit appointment of temporary workers. There is no such provision in the law to have a temporary worker. The ideal thing would be to have a cadre of workers of whom, let's say, 60-65% would be regular workers and 30-35% would be temporary. And the temporary workers, if the demand goes down, can be laid off on the last come, first go basis. And then when demand picks up, they can be brought back. But that doesn't exist. So these workers, who we still have workers on that basis, are called contract workers. The system which we changed in Manesar was that earlier on and everywhere else in the industry, contract workers are supplied by contractors. And it's the contractor who decides who's going to work when. The result is the worker himself is really at the mercy of the contractor, and he doesn't have a direct relationship with the actual employer, which is the company. We've changed that. And all our so-called contract workers who are working on the basis like these temporary workers I described are actually recruited by us on the same basis as we recruit our regular workers, used to recruit regular workers. And the condition is that when regular vacancies occur, these temporary workers will be the ones who will move into the regular cadres. The salary scales of our contract workers, based on the number of years of service which they have, is only marginally lower than what a regular worker with the same years of service would get. It's not different. It's not that they're just paid minimum wages or anything like that. We are way above the minimum wages. And they get a lot of the other benefits the regular worker gets. So I think if you compare the contract workers in Maruti with the contract workers in any industry in this area, you will find that we are giving far better conditions than anybody else.
Next question.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Sure.
You know, Venkat said Maruti is today sold in 100, exported to 100 countries. What has been your experience, you know, with the success story in India for Maruti 800, the phenomenal Maruti 800 as it, you know, sort of blew everything off and took India to the next level, you know, gave aspiration, you know, turned aspiration into reality for the average Indian. What's been your experience in the developing countries of exporting Maruti to those countries, and how is that business taking shape?
See, the Maruti 800 became a car in India which expanded the market to people who couldn't otherwise afford a car. We found that there was a segment of people in different parts of the world who wanted a similar car because they had a similar problem. Even in the developed countries, there was a segment of customers who wanted a small, easy car to drive for things like going to the market or dropping children off to school. And we actually started exports of the Maruti 800, first to Hungary. Then we found that we could sell the same car in France, and it went to Holland, and it went to Germany, and it went to UK, and all these places. Equally, the Maruti 800 became very popular in countries like Sri Lanka and Nepal and things, because the type of customer there is not very different from the customer in India. The other advantage we had when we went to Italy and these places was that the existing small cars in these countries did not have air conditioners as a standard feature. When we started selling air-conditioned cars in Italy, and people found that these cars actually performed very well in the sense that they didn't lose pickup or performance because of air conditioners, they became very popular. Because when we went, we were apprehensive that, you know, Italy is a Fiat market, it's a Fiat country. I don't know, we didn't know whether our cars could actually sell in Italy. But because of this air conditioning option and benefit which the customers got, we were selling very well in Italy. After some years, we had to discontinue because European standards of emission and safety became much stricter. But as long as Euro 1 standards were applicable, we had a great time in all these countries. Thank you.
What are your plans for other developing countries? Anything for the immediate future right now? Africa?
The Maruti 800 is, of course, now discontinued. But the Alto is the equivalent, and smaller cars still which go very well today we find in developing countries are things like the Alto, the Wagoner, the Celerio, and even the Swift. Because in all the countries I'm describing, including Africa, and sorry, I should have mentioned South America.
Yeah.
We have had a lot of success in the South American countries with our cars. And Chile has been I think our top selling country, if you accumulate the cars sold in all these years, probably I think the highest number of cars have gone to Chile. It's hard to believe that from India we can sell cars to Chile, but it works out. And so I think we will continue in these markets. Africa, to my mind, will in the years to come offer great potential for the car market from India. Because the income levels in Africa are not high, will not be high for years to come. And in places where there are both white and colored people, the incomes of the colored people particularly are on the lower side. And these people, and they all aspire to have a car everywhere, I think the only way they can get a car is if they can get a low-cost car. So we are especially keeping our contacts with the African market and trying to see how to develop our market in that country, because I think we have a product which in many ways is not available anywhere else in the world, and which we can make available to the customers at a price which nobody else can make available. So I think in the years to come, Africa should be the place.
Good potential.
You know, sorry, yeah.
I've got 3 questions to you. One is, cybersecurity has said that the Nano has been a huge cash drain on the Tata Motors. If Maruti were to do it, first of all, would you have done a Nano? And if so, would you have marketed it differently? Secondly, what will be the impact of aggregators like Uber and Ola on car ownership? And thirdly, what do you think of self-driving cars?
Of?
Self-driving cars, you know?
Self-driven
Oh,
cars.
self-driving car, sorry.
I want to add to that. How would you have marketed Nano if you were running it? Why do you think it has failed? Was it a marketing strategy failure, or the production costs were much higher than the price? Or how do you analyze the failure of Nano? And if you were to be in charge, how would you have made it a success?
You know, at the time when the Nano was much in the news and was being talked about and such things, a lot of occasions I was asked about Maruti also doing the Nano and its impact. And our very clear reply in all occasions was that we as a company, Suzuki and Maruti, both believe that we are not capable of producing a car with the specifications of the Nano and the price of the Nano. So the answer is that we would not have produced a Nano because we couldn't have produced a Nano, and therefore the strategy of marketing and all daily was not something which would ever be a question with us. I think what has happened is, while the concept and intention behind the Nano was a very excellent, laudable concept, because I think Mr. Tata genuinely felt sorry for those families which were traveling around on a scooter. But I think the product at that price became somewhat of an unsurmountable challenge to meet that price level and also meet the expectations and aspirations of a car buyer. Because a car buyer is not only looking for a means of transport. He has a little bit more when he buys a car than just a transport. Because if it was just a transport, then so many types of cars and so many designs and colors and all And the luxury cars and a whole range of products would never sell because people are not, so they're not looking for a transport. They're looking something beyond a transport. And I think the Nano failed to meet the aspirations of the car buyer in its totality. Maybe not in terms of one or two factors, but in its totality. So the answer to your question, sir, is that we have always felt that we could not produce a Nano at what is this supposed to do. We do try and produce cars at as low cost as we can, but that's the best we can do. We do not have the know-how to do better than that. And what is the second question? Oh, Uber and Ola.
Yeah, that's right.
I believe that Uber and Ola are a very good thing for the car industry. The reason is that they bring much greater efficiency into the ability of people to use cars for transportation. The cars are used much more intensively, much more efficiently, and there's much less of empty running, all of which therefore leads to greater efficiency. The future, I believe, will see the growth of these types of companies to a much greater extent, and they will become large purchasers of cars. And I'm sure a lot of individuals will find it's more economic and convenient for them to use these aggregators and cars from these aggregators than own their own cars and bother about maintenance and insurance and registration and all that kind of stuff. They won't have to do that. So that is what I think the future is going to be. Now, many people have said, will that mean a drop in car sales? I said, no. I think it will mean an increase in car sales. Because car sales are a function of the total kilometers which people travel by cars. Ultimately, a car is replaced after it has done so many kilometers of running. It's scrapped, let me say, not replaced. You may pass out on to somebody else. But overall, a car is scrapped after it has lived its life, which means it has done so many kilometers. When it is being used as by one of these aggregators, it reaches that much faster. So its replacement comes much faster. If I sell a car to a normal customer in India, he will run 7, 8, 10,000 kilometers in a year. So his replacement cycle is very long. If it's an Ola guy, he will maybe run 40,000 kilometers in a year. So his replacement cycle comes much faster. So as a manufacturer, I'm not worried at all about Olas and Ubers. I think they are going to be good for the industry.
I will ask questions.
Self-driven cars.
I would love to see people try and put their technology to work in the Indian driving conditions. I think no technology will work here. When nobody obeys any of the driving rules, nobody obeys any of the systems which are there, how do you devise a technology which will predict customer behavior? Because nobody can predict the customer behavior here.
When do you expect the next generation of cars? I mean, hybrid moving to...
Well, I think the next generation, as far as India is concerned, will be hybrids for the smaller cars. Because today, globally, there is no hybrid system suitable for a small car. I should say low-cost car. And I think that is what needs to be developed. We are working at it. We, I meaning Suzuki and Maruti, are working at it because that's an area of maximum interest to us. Big companies like Toyotas and all are not so much interested in the small cars. They have their other big cars to sell with hybrids. But for us, a low-cost hybrid is a very key requirement.
When do you expect one out, sir?
I wish I could predict.
Couple of years?
I just cannot predict. But it's not in a couple of years, I don't think.
Mr. Bhargava, considering that Africa and southern state America are your big export market, does Maruti have any plans to have production facilities set up in some African country or in South America or Sri Lanka, where practically every second car seems to be Maruti?
Suzuki already has production facilities. And I think depending on the volume of demand in a country, production facilities can be established. Because what is required is there should be a large enough demand to justify the investment to be made. And there also has to be local component manufacturing. Just putting a car assembly plant and importing all the components doesn't make much sense. You must have enough volume to also have a component industry. So wherever those conditions get satisfied, I'm sure Suzuki, Maruti would venture into those. It should be economical to both the user and the manufacturer to set up a facility.
India is now manufacturing 3.4 million cars every year. 10 years down the line, what do you think would be the number of cars that may be produced in India? And will Maruti continue to maintain nearly 50% of the market 10 years down the line?
Those are really questions for, what should I say, people who can look at the future.
Fortune tellers.
Fortune tellers. But see, the uncertainty factors in India are essentially related to what kind of sustained economic growth we can have. If you look at China in a period of 15 years grew its car market by something like 30 times or 35 times. They grew that fast because the economy was moving at 12-14% a year.
Continuously.
Continuously. There was no looking
Let up.
back. What to predict about India's growth rate is the question for the long term.
So, but at 25 kilometers of roads made every day in India, what is your parallel on that in terms of car numbers?
No, these roads are all basically highways connecting cities. But the main users of cars drive in the cities. And nothing like that is being constructed in the cities at all.
They're not even paving the streets.
So the problem is that the infrastructure in the cities is becoming more and more difficult for people to buy and use cars. That's one of the reasons why Ola and Uber will possibly become more popular in cities than
Even
personal ownership of cars.
Very true.
And but I think while I don't think we can get to the Chinese level of growth either of GDP or of cars, I think the policies which Mr. Modi is following and what he's trying to do should, if these continue for the next 5-10 years, lead to a sustained growth of between 8 and 10%. And with that kind of more modest growth, the car market should also grow at not less than 10% a year.
No, it's a pretty big number.
So Are we talking about more chaos on the roads of Delhi and other cities in the country? Driving is a nightmare anywhere.
See, Mr. Venkatarayanan, we only take action when there's a real crisis on our heads. We are driven from crisis to crisis. And I think, for example, what you're seeing in Delhi in the last 2-3 days may just possibly get some action actually happening. And in terms of traffic and urban infrastructure, we have had a situation, not very often, but sometimes, of some VVIPs getting stuck in traffic. And if that happens more often, then I think you might get...
Are you suggesting we tail the VIPs and make sure they get started?
Shantanu?
Yeah, welcome to the FCC, sir. Shantanu from Dow. Just one question. The yen is now strengthened again because people are kind of predicting Donald Trump will become the next president of the US. And with a stronger yen, it definitely affects Maruti Suzuki. And you have talked about how the parent is bullish on India and it's investing more money in Gujarat. So how do you play it in context of a stronger yen and about SMC's plans for India? Do we see more investments coming on from Suzuki to India and even Maruti investing outside India in manufacturing plants?
See, the yen has always been a very volatile currency. What you are seeing today and this reaction to the possibility of a Trump win is something which is going to be there for the next 1 week. At the end of that, we will know whether it's a well-founded fear or it's not a well-founded fear in that Hillary Clinton will become the president. So again, once that comes about, possibly there'll be a reaction. But also, of course, the yen, we have a cross trade between the yen and the dollar and the rupee. It's not a direct rate. So with the dollar becoming weaker, but if the yen becomes stronger, I'm not sure how much of a difference it makes to the rupee because one offsets the other. Our dependence on the yen for imports has been lessening over the years because we have now, at least for the last 5 years, been following a very active policy for localizing all the components which vendors were importing from Japan and elsewhere, particularly Japan. And that policy of localization is still continuing. So as we go along, that dependence on the yen reduces. Further, the exports to Japan, assuming they will continue at some level in the future, will give us a further natural hedge against imports from Japan because we'll be earning in yen from the Japanese exports.
If there are no more questions, you have any?
Just a supplementary to that, a stronger yen, which recently was at 100 to the dollar, is affecting exports of Japanese cars, like cars made in Japan. I'm not sure how many cars export to Japan. Do you think Suzuki will use Maruti as kind of a proxy or kind of a export base, a big export base to make cars and sell from India because of the cheaper and better in terms of revenue generation than exporting from Japan?
See, at 100 yen to the dollar, Japanese car makers have actually done quite well in export of cars. They had more difficulty when the yen was in the 80s level. But when it went up to 100 and above 100, and you can't be sure it won't go above 100 to 105, 110 in the next few months. So that situation is unlikely to happen because Also remember, Suzuki will continue to export from Japan as long as it is economically viable to do so. Because they have investments, they have employees, they can't just shut down everything in Japan, not possible. So that will continue unless the yen becomes so strong that it becomes a losing proposition to export from Japan. India is being used, but our strength is in small cars. We cannot be as competitive in the bigger cars as we are in the smaller cars. So that has also to be kept in mind.
But the ads do show all the technology and capability that India has to make.
Yeah, he's saying is the advertisements of the Make in India campaign on BBC and CNN, are they in any way having an impact on
Maruti.
Maruti's foreign sales, and for that matter on other manufacturers, even though they are aimed at
Well,
foreign
as
manufacturers
far
coming in?
as Maruti, please, sorry, I made you stand. As far as Maruti is concerned, I don't think these ads which try to publicize and create greater awareness of the Indian government's priority to manufacturing and the desire to support investments in manufacturing in India have any real impact on Maruti sales. We have been manufacturing in India for the last 35 years. We've been exporting from India for about almost 30 years. And people buy these products partly because of the Suzuki brand name and subsequently because of the experience with the cars. There isn't too much of manufactured export out of India other than the automotive sector. Components made in India are being exported to the extent of between almost $11 billion. We are exporting, we have exported of 600, 700,000 cars out of India every year. So,
Every year.
huh, but this is everybody now, Hyundai, Ford,
All
yeah.
brands.
all the brands, not Maruti. So people have got used to the idea that cars made in India are as good as cars made anywhere else, and people are buying those cars without hesitation. Otherwise, all these companies would not make cars in India. You know, Hyundai is making very large number of cars. Ford is using India as a base, and Toyota is also using India as a base. So, but I think what Mr. Modi is trying to do is to change the perception that India is not a manufacturing friendly country. Unfortunately, for many decades, India was looked upon as a country which was not friendly to foreign investments and particularly foreign investments in manufacturing. Unless that perception changes, it becomes not even possible to go to the next stage and tell people that these are areas you should invest in. So I think these ads which you're talking about are designed more for purposes of changing perception than by selling any of the existing products out of India.
May I now invite Mr. Munish Gupta to propose a vote of thanks.
Well, as always, it's such a pleasure to hear you of your vast experience and of course hear the success story of Maruti. Thank you for taking the time out to be with us, and I'm glad to see so many of our members and invited guests here today. And of course, as good as you are, you got a good press. So thank you again for coming, and thank you to all our members and guests here for coming for this interaction. We hope to see you soon again, sir.
Thank you.